This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, thank you.
All
Thanks,
right,
Lisa.
welcome.
There's Carolyn. So good morning. For those, there's a few new people today. My name's Raleigh. I'm a John O'Donohue-ophile. So I'm just going to set the stage for today. I'm really happy to see you all here, including new faces. And we're just going to pick up with where we are right now. I sent out some questions for you to think about. So that's what I'd like to start with, because again, for those of you who are new, this is not Raleigh talking at you about John O'Donohue. This is us seeing what touched us about this book called The Blessed Space Between Us. And even if you don't have the book, that's okay. But it would be good. So I sent out sort of I sent out a lot of questions actually. And I think I'd like to just start to see if any of the questions I sent bring up anything for you that you would like to share, including reading a poem or answering one of them or anything. And then I'll fill in some blanks after about 5 minutes of silence if no one talks. But I want to give you plenty of time to bring whatever you're holding at the moment forward, if you're willing.
I think I would like to just talk a little bit about a couple that struck me. I think probably people look for something that happens to be germane in their own experience at a particular time. And for me, one of the things, or probably the most germane issue for me, was the fact that my wife died about 4 months ago. And so I have been within the hold, so to speak, of grief. And I never realized that grief can sort of just come on you. You know, you go about your business and all of a sudden it hits you like a bomb, or somebody says something and all of a sudden you're sort of back to square one. And I'm just, I love so much about how John O'Donohue talks about grief. That was the first one. Well, it wasn't the first one. I just started reading the book, but when I came to grief, it really hit home for me. And so I'd like to read the one, which is on page 117. And it says something there also, which I think is one of the most important things about John O'Donohue, which is the ability to, on the one hand, experience our, to be able to sight and feel our experience as ordinary people, and then to go from that to a degree of insight, which is way beyond what we usually see. And I was just floored by this particular one that he did on grief on page 117. So maybe I'll go ahead and just read it.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
When you lose someone you love, your life becomes strange. The ground beneath you gets fragile. Your thoughts make your eyes unsure, and some dead echo drags your voice down where words have no confidence. Your heart has grown heavy with loss, and though this loss has wounded others too, no one knows what has been taken from you when the silence of absence deepens. Flickers of guilt kindle regret for all that was left unsaid or undone. There are days when you wake up happy, again inside the fullness of life, until the moment breaks and you are thrown back onto the black tide of loss. Days when you have your heart back, you're able to function well, until in the middle of work or encounter, suddenly with no warning, you're ambushed by grief. It becomes hard to trust yourself. All you can depend on now is that sorrow will remain faithful to itself. More than you, it knows its way and will find the right time to pull and pull the rope of grief until that coiled hill of tears has reduced to its last drop. Gradually, you will learn acquaintance with the invisible form of your departed. And when the work of grief is done, the wound of loss will heal, and you will have learned to wean your eyes from the gap in the air and be able to enter the hearth in your soul where your loved one has awaited your return all the time. I find when I read this poem, it just hit me like a bomb because I realized, even though I've spent a lot of time reading various spiritual things, I had gotten so, my wife was on hospice and I was the caretaker. And so I'd become so embroiled in the physical degeneration process that I could not see further. But when I read this poem, and the use of words is so incredible, gradually you will learn acquaintance. Who ever heard of using words like that? Gradually you will learn acquaintance with the invisible form of your departed. And when the work of grief is done, the wound of loss will heal, and you will have learned to wean your eyes from the gap in the air. I thought that part where he says, weaning your eyes from the gap in the air, lends a little bit more understanding to bless the space between us. He talks about a gap in the air where your loved one is disappeared, but you take your eyes away from that and you enter the hearth in your soul. That was, again, that use of words, the hearth in your soul, where your loved one has awaited your return all the time. Anyway, to me, that was just like a Zen master hitting me over the head. And I realized that what I was grieving was what was keeping me in the grieving state was the realization of the loss of the physical being, not realizing that the actual real entity of the person is their spiritual being, not the being which is modified and colored by our physical senses. So that was really quite an eye-opening one for me, and it actually had a healing effect. Since I read that poem, I have not had any grief, which is truly astounding to me. It just, as soon as I realized that what I was grieving was not the real person, and that the real person was the spiritual being, then that process simply quit. I have not had it happen since. And there's another, I don't want to take up too much time, but I think one of the things that that Raleigh talked about was citing some particular area where we particularly loved what he says. And there's a place at the end on page 185 where he says,
Gerald, can I just interrupt you for 1 minute?
Sure.
I just want to open just a little opportunity for reflection on what you've just shared. It's quite profound. Before you switch subjects, and also to give others a little bit of a chance.
Yes.
I'm really touched by what you shared. And I could just feel your words as you read it. And I'm just wondering if anybody else has any reflections on what Gerald shared.
Well, I do. I think the whole idea of recognizing that grief is a human condition that not everyone experiences, but those who do experience it long to be understood. And it sounds like Jerry in a moment's time, you knew that John O'Donohue understood your grief.
It's very true.
Wow. Anyone else? So Jerry,
Yeah,
do you want
that's such a,
to go ahead?
well, I just think that's such a powerful blessing. I love what you said there, Carolyn. And that's something about John O'Donohue that's so unique, I feel like, is how relatable he is in all sorts of different circumstances. And I don't know if that's because of being a priest and like spending so much time listening, you know, doing deep listening to people with all their different experiences and with just the sort of like heart that he has, you know, as being, I like what Shannon said last week, that he's so universal. And because he can somehow with words get to the heart of things in a way that's just, I think, incredibly unique. I mean, obviously he has a powerful intellect as well, but he also, yeah, I don't know how he can just get to the heart of things and bring in the elements all the time too. Like you said, Jerry, the gap in the air, it's like, yeah, it's so fascinating.
And another thing which is so fascinating is that he can go from our human experience to a divine reality in moments. And that's amazing. It's one of the most amazing books, if you want to call it that. I was talking to Tracy earlier. It's almost like the book is a sermon. To call it a book is okay, but it'd be like talking about Christ's Sermon on the Mount as a lecture. You know, it wasn't a lecture. He has the ability to go to the heart and soul of things in a moment with words and his experience.
Jerry, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to thank you for the way you read that and sharing. I've seen you 2 or 3 times only, and your open, very accessible heart, and how beautifully and authentically you share yourself weaving through this poem. It's just, I just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate it. Deeply touched also.
Thank you for your thoughts.
So I'm wondering what other things are in the room with us today that you might want to bring forward. Any of you?
I was particularly struck by the way he talks about kindness. And I would just read just a little bit at the beginning, which is, I find so incredibly beautiful. There is a kindness that dwells deep down in things. It presides everywhere, often in the places where we least expect. The world can be harsh and negative, but if we remain generous and patient, kindness inevitably reveals itself. Something deep in the human soul seems to depend on the presence of kindness. Something instinctive in us expects it. And once we sense it, we are able to trust and open ourselves. Here in Connemara, the mountains are terse and dark. Left to themselves, they would make for a brooding atmosphere. However, everywhere around in between, there are lakes. The surface of these lakes takes on the variations of the surrounding light to create subtle diffusions of color. Thus, their presence qualifies the whole landscape with a sense of warmth and imagination. If we did not feel that some ultimate kindness holds sway, we would feel like outsiders confronted on every side by a world toward which we could make no real bridges. The word kindness has a gentle sound that seems to echo the presence of compassionate goodness. When someone is kind to you, you feel understood and seen. There is no judgment or harsh perception directed toward you. Kindness has gracious eyes. It is not small-minded or competitive. It wants nothing back for itself. Kindness strikes a resonance with the depths of your own heart. It also suggests that your vulnerability that's somehow exposed is not taken advantage of. Rather, it has become an occasion for dignity and empathy. Kindness casts a different light, an evening light that has the depth of color and patience to eliminate what is complex and rich in difference. I thought that that's not the only place where he talks about kindness. And I'm sure you'll all recall where Moses asked to see the face of God. And essentially, I may be saying it wrongly, but God sort of says, well, you can't see my face, but I will turn my back and you will know something of my nature. And one of the things of the nature of God is chesed, loving kindness. I think of that when I hear what he says about the nature of reality being kindness. And so those are the two things. And if we have time, I'd like other people to be able to read, but there's another really beautiful poem here about the loved one. It's on page 170. If we have time later, I'd love to read it because it's so beautiful. The death of the beloved. It's on page 170, but let other people have you say. I'd love to hear what other people have to say. I just like to say one thing. This man is. I have hardly read anything like this in my life. It's one of the few books that I have ever seen that can reach that level and touch your heart in that kind of a way. And so I have sent a number of books to relatives and friends because the book itself is a blessing. And I'm so grateful to Raleigh and Tracy for having brought that particular book. This book is obviously, it's a result of it. He didn't sit down and let's say I'm going to sit down and write a book about blessings. Obviously, it's a whole lifetime of insight that he's accrued over time. And he says himself, he's written this book over time. And that's so apparent that it is that rich in insight and vision. But let me quit talking here.
Thank you, Jerry, for sharing. That was lovely.
Shirley.
So what touched your heart?
What is that, Tracy?
It's me. I just said,
that was-
what I'm asking the group, what touched your heart?
Well, I chose a poem or a blessing this week. Unfortunately, my book has still not arrived. I always try to order used books, and the 8 to 10 day range that the post office gave has now stretched out. But I did find thank goodness for the internet. I did find a blessing from this book. Don't think it was read last week, A Blessing for Equilibrium. And I don't have page numbers here, but I think it comes from like chapter 5, States of Heart. And what was interesting when it came time,
127. It's
127.
127.
When I started looking for a blessing to read, I thought, you know, I was lucky to have found one last week. I don't think there'll be many more that I will be able to relate to. But I looked up in the Library of Congress his blessings from this book, and quite honestly, there were 2 pages of them listed, and I could have easily read 5 of them because they touched my heart. Just like Jerry, it's just hard for me to believe that, you know, a man that lived across the ocean can be so relatable to us and our culture here. So I chose A Blessing for Equilibrium. Like the joy of the sea coming home to shore, may the music of laughter break through your soul. As the wind wants to make everything dance, may your gravity be lightened by grace. Like the freedom of the monastery bell, may the clarity of mind make your eyes smile. As water takes whatever shape it is in, so free may you be about who you become. As silence smiles on the other side of what's said, may a sense of irony give you perspective. As time remains free of all that it frames, may fear or worry never put you in chains. May your prayer of listening deepen enough to hear in the distance the laughter of God. And this time of year makes me want to get out and renew myself, but I also don't want to lose the solitude of winter. I want the equilibrium. I don't want to become so busy that I forget to stop and breathe.
Lovely.
I love that blessing for equilibrium. There's something about he is so amazing with his juxtapositioning of things, you know, that just, yeah, leaves you with the actual feeling of what he's trying to express. And that one in particular that's another one of my favorites, Kay. So thanks for bringing it.
I'd never read that one.
I was going to ask if you could read it again because I found it fascinating that it's a different version, and that kind of took me back and I'd love to hear it.
Oh, is it different than what's in the book?
Yeah, it's a little different. Not
Just slightly. And
oh,
it's lovely though. Do you want to read it again?
Sure. Like the joy of the sea coming home to shore, may the music of laughter break through your soul. As the wind wants to make everything dance, may your gravity be lightened by grace. Like the freedom of the monastery bell, may clarity of mind make your eyes smile. As water takes whatever shape it is in, so free may you be about who you become. As silence smiles on the other side of what's said, may a sense of irony give you perspective. As time remains free of all that it frames, may fear or worry never put you in chains. May your prayer of listening deepen enough to hear in the distance the laughter of God. So I have a question for those of you that have the book. One line here just didn't fit for me. I thought it was kind of sing-songy and it didn't sound like the John O'Donohue that I'd read in other blessings. And that's the one, as time remains free of all that it frames, may fear or worry never put you in chains. It sounded to me like a 10-year-old wrote that. Is that different than in the book?
Yes,
Oh,
that-
okay.
So
That
it
makes me
read-
feel good. That makes me feel good.
so it reads this way, Kay, if you're interested.
Mhm.
so
As
where,
time-
okay, where did you get that particular reading from? I'm not sure what is the source of the words that you're reading?
Well, it's attributed to John O'Donohue, and I got it from the site First ULU organization #love note blessing for equilibrium. So I got it off of the internet. Oh, here it is. First Unitarian Church of Louisville.
I see.
Does it have a date? I mean, in comparison, that's a stupid question. In comparison to this, I wonder which one was the earlier version, is what I was wondering.
Oh, it doesn't have it on here. That probably did on the website, but I just printed off part of it. So I mean, I just printed off the blessing part of it.
Hmm.
But I'd like to hear what the original, I assume it's the original, as book says.
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay.
It's the second to last stanza. As time remains free of all its frames, may your mind stay clear of all it names.
That is correct, but when you read it before, I'm not saying that it's not what you read was incorrect, but that is what you just read is different from what you read previously. The part,
Yeah, it's interesting on the internet. Sometimes people, liberties with stuff, or who knows what happened there. But I'd say that, yeah, the book is the one that is probably.
It could be an earlier version, is what I was wondering. And I thought that part, may your mind stay clear of all names. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. May your mind stay clear of all it names. And then what you read about fear and worry, was that what the other line says?
Mhm.
And
May fear or worry never put you in chains.
And that I had this association as you read that. I often feel like language in the normal world, not John O'Donohue, but limits us. And I feel like the concepts we have sometimes in the words we use are so limiting. And so that I loved, and when I read this poem previously without you reading it, I loved that line of may your mind stay clear of all it names, because it's like our need to define and understand and identify things through language. And that all comes from fear, in my opinion, to some extent, of isolation, because language ties us to each other. And so anyway, I just rolled with that as you read it. I thought, why isn't that fascinating? That's all. I don't know. My own little.
it is very interesting. I'm really curious to know whether he wrote various versions of the same thing, or whether somebody just wrote it down wrongly. It'd be really interesting to know what his original thought was.
And Kay, the third stanza is also different. And yours speaks about monastery bells. And this one says, like the dignity of moonlight restoring the earth, may your thoughts incline with reverence and respect.
I like that one better too.
I would like to comment on the middle stanza, right in the center of the poem. This just blew my mind. As water takes whatever shape it is in, so free may you be about who you become. That's absolutely astonishing.
Mhm.
Lovely, Wayne. There's so much hope there.
Yeah, well, just relax. You know, be free about who you become, just like water finding its own level.
I'm looking, isn't there one that he wrote about water, as you said that, Wayne? It's-
Yeah, In Praise of Water. That's a
what
big
number?
one. Did we?
I don't see it now, but I know I saw it last night. Oh, it's 75 and under thresholds. Mhm.
You want to read it?
I had it marked as one of the 5,000 that I loved. Sure. And because water, many things about the fluidity of water have been kind of serendipitously coming to me. So I love it that Wayne identified that. In praise of water, let us bless the grace of water, the imagination of the primeval ocean where the first forms of life stirred and emerged to dress the vacant earth with warm quilts of color. The well whose liquid root worked through the long night of clay, trusting ahead of itself openings that would yet yield to its yearning until at last it arises in the desire of light to discover the pure quiver of itself, flowing crystal clear and free through delighted emptiness. The courage of a river to continue belief in the slow fall of ground, always falling farther toward the unseen ocean. The river does what words would love, keeping its appearance by insisting on disappearance, its only life surrendered to the event of pilgrimage, carrying the origin to the end. Seldom pushing or straining, keeping itself to itself, everywhere all along its flow, all at one with its sinuous mind and utter rhythm, never awkward. It continues to swirl through all unlikeliness with elegance. A ceaseless traverse of presence, soothing on each side the stilled fields, sounding out its journey, raising up a buried music where the silence of time becomes almost audible. Tides stirred by the eros of the moon draw from that permanent restlessness perfect waves that languidly rise and pleat in gradual forms of aquamarine to offer every last tear of delight at the altar of stillness inland. And the rain in the night, driven by the loneliness of the wind to perforate the darkness, as though some air pocket might open to release the perfume of the lost day and salvage some memory from its forsaken turbulence and drop its weight of longing into the earth and anchor. Let us bless the humility of water, always willing to take the shape of whatever otherness holds it. The buoyancy of water, stronger than the deadening downward drag of gravity. The innocence of water, flowing forth without thought of what awaits it. The refreshment of water, dissolving the crystals of thirst. Water, voice of grief, cry of love, in the flowing tear. Water, vehicle, and idiom of all the inner voyaging that keeps us alive. Blessed be water, our first mother.
Well, that is extraordinary.
I didn't become aware of this group until too late, so I didn't read the book, but I did listen to, was it Tippett's interview with O'Donoghue? And I assume many of the themes in that are recurring in most of his books. But the water image you just spoke about or recited brings back two things. One thing he talked about was he asked, well, where do you come from and what formed you? And then he starts talking about landscape. And I remember being in Maine. I don't know if you've been to Acadia National Park and Jordan Pond, but I was hiking around there and came to a shoreline and looked across the pond to two mountains, just rounded mountains. And somewhere someone had talked to me about serenity and finding serenity by looking at the water and then going down deep into it and finding that in yourself. And that's always been very important to me. In the interview, he mentioned looking out on the ocean, and the top of the ocean is very riled, but then go down underneath it. I prefer my Jordan Pond picture, but anyway, that's been really important to me.
Thank you, Gay. I actually thought about doing a whole extra session on the Krista Tippett interview.
Yeah,
Because it's so
there's
rich.
so much in it.
There's like 5 or 10 themes of something that we could talk about for 25 minutes. Each one. Like, so maybe next year we'll do something. I don't know. I'm really drawn to this work.
Yeah.
I want to say yes, please to that.
Oh, you do? Okay. All right, I'll put it on my list. So
Yeah, the village where he was raised, is so interesting. I mean, he talks about it too there. It's just this like wild intersection between this rock, it's called the Burren because it's like a very barren place, but it's the place of all kinds of mythology and sort of magic. And yeah, it's right on the edge of the ocean and just the rock with these little farm paddocks in between. And it's interesting how as a child, and it's small, and there's not much around. Like it just, nature is number one there. So.
when little flowers grow up through the cracks, a little piece of grass or a little pink blossom, or it's extraordinarily beautiful in its barrenness, Yeah. It really formed him, didn't it?
Have any of you been there? Yeah, that's what that sounded
It was
like.
just in the fall. I was there in September.
And where is it we're talking about? I'm sorry, we didn't get it.
It's in County Clare. It's in the western part of Ireland. It's called the Burren.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I think it's so funny. I had a Irish friend many years ago, and from Ireland, and she'd say about going out west. And out west, when you're in the U.S., is like thousands of miles. And I don't know how many miles out west is in Ireland, but not very far.
Few hours.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I see we have a cat that likes John O'Donohue as well. Obviously listening intently there.
Yes, my very literate cat, Misty.
Who else would like to read?
I brought a poem, Raleigh, but I haven't been able to get the book yet, and I want to get the book also, Kay. And it just, it hasn't happened yet. I didn't get up to the bookstore to look there, and I haven't ordered it online. So like Kay, I got a poem online that may seem, looking at this absolutely gorgeous day, of which we've had several, it may seem like kind of a misnomer to read a poem called For the Dying. It has some of the most beautiful imagery. Those of you who know me know I like words. And if you listen, you'll hear Mr. O'Donohue singing me to sleep about words. May death come gently towards you, leaving you time to make your way through the cold embrace of fear to the place of inner tranquility. May death arrive only after a long life to find you at home among your own with every comfort and care you require. May your leave taking be gracious, enabling you to hold dignity through awkwardness and illness. May you see the reflection of your life's kindness and beauty in all the tears that fall for you. As your eyes focus on each face, may your soul take its imprint, drawing each image within as companions for the journey. May you find for each one you love a different locket of jeweled words to be worn around the heart to warm your absence. May someone who knows and loves the complex village of your heart be there to echo you back to yourself and create a sure word raft to carry you to the further shore. May your spirit feel the surge of true delight when the veil of the visible is raised and you glimpse again the living faces of departed family and friends. May there be some beautiful surprise waiting for you inside death, something you never knew or felt, which with one simple touch absolves you of all loneliness and loss as you quicken within the embrace for which your soul was eternally made. May your heart be speechless at the sight of the truth of all your belief had hoped, your heart breathless in a light and lightness where each and everything is at last its true self within that serene belonging that dwells beside us on the other side of what we see.
That is extraordinary. Who wrote that? Who wrote that?
That's a John O'Donohue. It's just not from the book.
Oh, I did not know.
No, it is. It's on page 180.
Oh, is it on in the book?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
in the book.
I didn't realize that. I was trying to find on the poem on the internet site if they told me where the poem was published. They just gave me the poem. So
Oh, that
Magic.
is so beautiful. That is really beautiful. What is the title of that?
for
For
the
the, for the dying.
Thank you.
I was just listening to his book on Audible this morning about beauty, the invisible embrace, and he speaks a lot about death and dying in that, and what an honor it was as a priest to be called, to the bedside, and just like there's something about that image of the word raft and that wish that everyone could be surrounded by people that can be whispering the reflections to you and create this word raft for you as you travel onward was like the most very beautiful thing ever to me. And he talks about in the book how he said, we deal with death in isolation and there's no cultural webbing to ground it. And therefore, so often people are so uncomfortable because death is tough, you know, for us, really tough. But he just talks about how much beauty he's seen at that. He's like, I wouldn't even call it a dying bed. I would call it a birthing bed because you're like being born into the next part of your adventure. So thank you for choosing that one, Jane. That was just like, I mean, I just think that's the most beautiful and important poem.
You know, we talk about having a good death. And if you've been privileged enough to be with someone when this poem is the experience that you have, it's incredible. You would never fear death.
I was going to say there's so much life in this poem.
Mhm.
You know, there's so much life in every moment. And this poem, like Tracy was saying, it juxtaposes these concepts like paradoxes. They say it's a level of higher functioning, you know, emotional, intellectual functioning to be able to hold paradox, to be able to hold two concepts at once. And I don't know, I find it, when I listen to these juxtapositions, I just feel relaxed instead of anxious.
It's comforting.
It's really comforting. Yeah. Wow, amazing sharing today.
Yeah, thank you, Raleigh. Tracy, one of your questions that you sent out was, is there any one of these blessings that you like to read? Well, on page 37, for those of you that have the book, it's kind of interesting. This one called In Praise of Air, A-I-R. And almost every image in here, it is the space between. This is long. I'm not going to read. I'll just read part of the first page and then stop. And praise of air. Let us bless the air, benefactor of breath, keeper of the fragile bridge we breathe across. Air waiting outside the womb to funnel the first breath that lets us begin to be here. Each moment drawn from its invisible stock. Air, vast neighborhood of the invisible, where thought lies, entering to arise in us as our own, enabling us to put faces on things that would otherwise stay strange and leave us homeless here. That's enough, but it's quite interesting. All these images are the space between.
So interesting that some of his longest benedictions are about air and water. It's kind of unusual to come across 2 or 3 pages on the same subject. Evidently, fascinates him so much. And he thinks it's so important that he goes on at quite beautiful length.
You're on mute, Carolyn.
At the end of that poem that Bill just read, he likens air to breath. And of course, life.
Mhm.
Kind of an odd thought or wondering if, and I don't think in this book it has it, but maybe it does. I wonder if he has, just thinking of air and water, and you're describing the village where he grew up, and I'm thinking of earth, rock, solidity. And I'm wondering if he's written anywhere about fire.
We read it last week.
Oh, and I missed it. So it's
No,
in,
Diana read the lovely poem about fire. It's very
I think I tuned in right after that. So is it in this book?
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah,
just haven't found it yet. Okay, thank you.
it's on page 12.
Yeah, it's in the first, I think it's in the first, yeah, it's in the beginnings, because that spark, right?
Yeah.
And then it's interesting because then the desires is the air, and in the thresholds is water, and then homecoming is earth. So
Mm,
it's interesting that he spread those out and put them where he did.
yeah,
Thank you for highlighting that.
yeah. I'd like to read one for old age, for obvious reasons. May the light of your soul mind you. May all your worry and anxiousness about your age be transfigured. May you be given wisdom for your eyes, for the eyes of your soul, to see this as a time of gracious harvesting. May you have the passion to heal what has hurt you and allow it to come closer and become one with you. May you have great dignity, sense how free you are. Above all, may you be given the wonderful gift of meeting the eternal light that is within you. May you be blessed. And may you find a wonderful love in yourself for yourself. It's beautiful.
May I know what was the title of that one and what page it was on?
I'm sorry, it was for old age on page 70.
Say that again, please.
On old age on page 70.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. 71, I think, in my book.
Thank you.
Okay.
I love that. That's perfect.
Not for you yet. Yeah, 71.
Thank you.
I couldn't resist on this first day of spring to read the beginning of the threshold section, and then I brought you a poem. It's by Mary Oliver that came into my inbox this morning. So on page 47, within the grip of winter, it's almost impossible to imagine the spring. The gray parish landscape is shorn of color. Only bleakness meets the eye. Everything seems severe and edged. Winter is the oldest season. It has some quality of the absolute. Yet beneath the surface of winter, the miracle of spring is already in preparation. The cold is relenting. The seeds are waking up. Colors are beginning to imagine how they will return. Love that line. Then imperceptibly, somewhere one bud opens and the symphony of renewal is no longer reversible. From the black heart of winter, a miraculous breathing plenitude of color emerges. This is called spring. Mary Oliver. Somewhere is a black bear. Somewhere a black bear has just arisen from a sleep and is staring down the mountain. All night in the brisk and shallow restlessness of early spring. I think of her, her 4 black fists flicking the gravel, her tongue like a red fire touching the grass, the cold water. There's only one question: how to love this world. I think of her rising like a black and leafy ledge to sharpen her claws against the silence of the trees. Whatever else, my life is with its poems and its music and its glass cities. It's also this dazzling darkness coming down the mountain, breathing and tasting. All day I think of her. Her white teeth, her wordlessness, her perfect love. Hmm.
That is a beautiful poem. I'm not familiar with Mary Oliver. Is that somebody that I should know?
Definitely. Might be worth a look. It's different though. Her poem's different, isn't it? Having to spend an hour reading John O'Donohue. It's quite different.
It is very different.
But
yeah.
she's also very nature-based. So I think that's one of the things that draws me to her writing.
You know, a good book, Jerry, to start with her is a small book called Thirst, because she talks a lot about faith in there. And you might enjoy that one to start with.
Thanks, Linda.
Mhm.
So we have 1 or 2 minutes left if anyone wants to put something out in the space that they would like to before we close. Here's your invitation.
I just want to say that this has been transformative for me, and I wish I could do this every day. Thank you.
You can do it every day, but not with all of us, but
Yeah, the combination of poetry
Yeah.
and others, and just the perfect balance of this. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you for doing this, Raleigh, and for introducing me to this wonderful poet that I will not leave again.
Lovely.
Yeah, thanks so much, Raleigh.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for coming and for sharing and bringing your full attention and heart and into the space. Thank you, Raleigh, for holding the space for us. And it was kind of serendipitous. Both Raleigh and I were like, oh, you know, Raleigh said, I'm just really loving poetry right now. And that, you know, because our theme is end of life right now, I was like, oh, John O'Donohue is so good. Both of us were simultaneously like, yes, John O'Donohue, Book of Blessings. So thanks everyone for being part of it.
And today's what we decide. It's the National Day of Poetry today.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh
I
my
heard
goodness.
on NPR this morning
Oh my goodness.
talking about poetry, so it's pretty cool.
Neat. Thanks for sharing that, Linda.
And Jerry, I want to thank you very much for your awesome sharing earlier. I don't know you, and I really, really appreciated it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your
Me
thought.
too. All of us, I think, Jerry. It's lovely. And the word that comes up for me is vulnerability. Tracy was thanking us for all that, but the word vulnerability came up, which is like this raw, open-hearted thing that we did today, which is such a gift to all the others in the space. So thank you all for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raleigh.
I'm waving, you can't see us.
Why we can't get our video to start?
Maybe we'll have to do an in-person John O'Donohue. We'll find out his birthday or something like that. And
That'd be cool.
we'll have a John O'Donohue tea or something.
Or Guinness.
Guinness, yeah, it would be more
I
like.
like it. Yeah, I'm for it.
Irish soda bread. I'll make that.
Yeah, who has Irish in your bloodline here? Yeah, even if you don't, that Irish blood has a lot of heart. So everyone's welcome there in Ireland.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Raleigh.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Thank you, Raleigh. Thank you, Tracy.
Have a wonderful day. I hope you all listen to some more poetry today. Good to see you virtually. Okay, I'll stop the recording, I guess.